Hi fellow tankers, it's Mobius Y here with the next episode of Mediums Forever, and here in episode 5 we're covering the Tier 10 Object 430. I guess you could call it the light at the end of the tunnel for this medium tank line. Excuse me. Mediums Forever is a 5-episode series where I showcase the tanks down the Object 430 line, the second Russian medium tank line. And it's different from my previous grind series in the fact that I use some of that 2 million free XP that I used to have, and simply play each tank fully upgraded for a while until I can get the next tank, and I do an extensive in-depth review on these tanks showcasing armor profiles, crew and module locations, so on and so forth. So here with episode 5 of Mediums Forever, the Tier 10 Object 430, the third Russian Tier 10 medium tank. This thing's kind of treated like the runt of the litter. It is essentially considered the worst of the 3 Russian medium tanks. However, that does not mean, in any sense of the word, that it is a bad tank. The thing that needs to be understood about the Tier 10 medium tanks in this game right now, as well as a couple that we don't have yet, is none of them are considered bad tanks. Even the M48 Patton and the FE40202, which are considered the worst of the Tier 10 mediums, are still good tanks. That is the thing about the Tier 10 mediums. They're all very good tanks. They have a much higher, what's the word I'm looking for, expectation of them in terms of performance and how well they will do if they are manned by a decent or even a good player who knows what they are doing. This is in contrast to some of the Tier 10 heavies and even tank destroyers, and especially artillery, where there are some straight up bad eggs of the bunch. But we're not talking about those kind of tanks. We're talking strictly about mediums here. So enough about that. The Object 430, it is still a good tank. It is simply overshadowed by its peers, not just the other Russian medium tanks, but other medium tanks in general. The Object 430, though, has some really, really interesting and good quirks about it, as well as a couple bad. The Object 430 has actually pretty good hull armor, and not just in the front, like the E50 Ossifam. It actually has pretty good all-around hull armor. Its upper front plate isn't a borderline automatic bounce like, say, the E50M. But it is definitely much more trolly, as it has more auto bounce angles, and it has 80 millimeters of side armor, making it very good at side scraping. So essentially, if you utilize both your side armor and your frontal plates to the best of your abilities, using lots of hull wiggling, quite a bit of erratic angling, and a fair amount of side scraping, you can actually generate a lot of bounces on this tank, more than you would expect in a Tier 10 medium tank, and wind up with a fair amount of damage blocked. Another good thing about the Object 430, which is often unmentioned, is the camo rating on this tank. The camo rating on the Object 430 is better than that of the Bat Chat, which is insane. The Bat Chat can be a ninja with the proper camo paint and crew skills associated with it. If you felt like a ninja in the Bat Chat, you will feel like a frickin' master ninja in the Object 430. There were instances where I was about 300 meters away from other Tier 10 tanks with 400 meters of view range, and they still couldn't spot me while I'm shooting at them. It's absolutely crazy. If you deck this tank's crew out with lots of camo skills, you can really feel like a frickin' ninja on the battlefield in a very well-hidden Tier 10 medium tank. The major saving grace on the Object 430 is this tank has the best DPM of all Tier 10 medium tanks. Better than the STB-1s. STB-1 comes a close second, though. But this tank has better DPM than its other Russian brethren. It has better DPM than the STB-1. And if you pay attention in this gameplay, you'll see that it has a 5.4 second reload on the gun, and that is strictly just with a gun rammer and brothers in arms on the crew. That is insane. This thing pumps out over 3,000 DPM on its own without the additional equipment or crew skills to lower the reload speed. Naturally, every tank has its offsets. In contrast, for having good camo, great DPM, and a high velocity, fairly accurate shooting gun, there are some bads to this thing. The Object 430 has pretty bad gun handling, hands down. On paper, it doesn't look as bad as the STB-1, but in practice, it feels as bad as the STB-1. This is largely in part because of the very poor dispersion values when moving the tank and rotating the turret. But it's also because this tank itself has an average aim time of 2.29, which is average for the game, but kind of low for medium tanks, especially top-tier medium tanks, like Tier 10. And the accuracy rating on the Xbox is 0.37, which is the worst out of all Tier 10 medium tanks. Even the STB-1 has 0.36. Excuse me. Now, that can be mitigated with the simple fact that this tank has, like I said, it has pretty good hull armor as well as a good camo rating. That allows it to get in fairly close, and I would say, like the STB-1, you kind of want to be within 200 meters, 250 meters of the main engagement. That's the best way to borderline guarantee that your shots will fly straight and true as possible, and maybe not necessarily hit the vulnerable points of the tanks you're aiming for to damage them, but they'll still hit the tank. Excuse me. That's essentially how it goes there. But because of this thing's pretty good hull armor, pretty good all-around hull armor, and its camo rating, and honestly, it's good. It's good mobility. After all, it is a Russian medium. It has really good overall mobility. It allows you to get in close and mitigate that crappy gun handling as much as possible. Granted, it's not always something that can be worked on. You're not always going to be guaranteed you're able to get in close and utilize the good DPM and mitigate that poor accuracy, but you just do the best you can, more or less. So that was my very first game, the Object 430, and that really set the bar quite high for my expectations for this tank. 4,325 damage dealt, 2,170 damage blocked, earning 33,000 silver. Good game there with Don Tomo, aka Ben from Beard Guys, running his bat chat that game. We kind of just worked together near the end there as we were able to flank around an entire group of tanks and close out the game there. So essentially, the Object 430, is it worth it grinding down this tank in and of itself? Well, yes and no. It's a Tier 10 medium tank, so a Tier 10 medium tank is always worth getting. The line itself is really good, so it's worth just getting even to the Tier 8 or Tier 9 down this line. For other reasons, which I will get into in just a minute here, but it's an overall good tank. And if you want to get one just for having adding to your Tier 10 mediums because you don't have very many, it is definitely worth going down this line for. Or if you have a lot of Tier 10 medium tanks in your garage already, if you just want to spice things up a little bit by putting something different in, something new, again, worth it going down this tank. If you're one of those people that only wants the best tank of each class at that tier, then you probably don't want to get this one. You probably want to stick with your T-62A, your Object 140, your Leopard 1, and your STB-1. So that's pretty much all I have to say on that. All in all, though, the grind itself is well worth it, if insofar as simply going to the Object 416 to give you access to all Tier 10 Russian medium tanks, which we'll go over in just a minute here. But the Object 430 itself is a pretty solid tank, and it is not by any means a bad choice to go down for a tier 10 medium tank to put into your garage. So I mentioned a couple times that the grind for the Object 430 is quite good, and we'll take a look here why. Essentially, the grind for the Object 430, it starts here at tier 5 with the T-34 Russian medium tank, very well-known medium tank. The T-34 branches off into 3 tanks. So when you're using the T-34, once you get it fully upgraded, you essentially have 2 options. You have the 57mm ZIS-4 gun and the 76mm S-54. You want to make sure you research these 2 packages because these are used on later tanks. But on the T-34 itself, I highly recommend you use the 57mm ZIS-4 over the 76 because the 57mm just has better gun handling and insanely good DPM. It will make your T-34 feel like a medium tank. Now the opposite is true for the A-43. You do get the 57mm ZIS-4 and the 76 S-54, but the A-43 has a saving grace of mobility with the upgraded engine and treads on the final package. You'll be using the 76mm S-54, which has poor accuracy, but everything else about it is good. The A-43 is a monster of a Tier 6 medium tank. You can simply see Episode 1 of Mediums Forever to see what I mean. So that should be a fairly quick grind. The A-44, which is the Tier 7 stock, you'll have the 57mm ZIS-4 unlocked, as well as the 76mm S-54, and it is simply up to you which one you prefer to use at Tier 7. The first real upgrade you get for the A-44 gives you enhanced treads and turret, and the final upgrade to the A-44 is 107mm ZIS-6. So essentially, this should be another short grind except for getting the final gun, as it might not be researched. The 107 does come off of heavy tanks, but it's only a few thousand XP to get it, and it's free if you already have heavy tanks researched. The Object 416 did not require a heck of a lot of XP, only about 100,000, so it can be done fairly quickly. And it starts off with a 100mm D10T gun. The first upgrade gives you some enhanced treads and a better turret. So that'll always be a fairly cheap grind right there. The final package gives you the 100mm M63, which is a Tier 9 rated gun on a Tier 8 medium tank. This is the saving grace of the Object 416. It has crazy DPM, really good pen for a Tier 8 medium tank at 201, and it just makes the Object 416 a very well-performing machine. Now the thing about the Object 416 is if you don't plan to continue to the Object 430, at least grind down to the Object 416. Over the T-44. If you have yet to go down any Russian medium tanks, go down the Object 416 line over the T-44, because the Object 416 actually splits off to both the Tier 9 Object 430 Type 2 and the Tier 9 T-54. These are the 2 Tier 9 Russian medium tanks that essentially give you access to all 3 Tier 10 Russian medium tanks, and you only had to go down one line to do it, to Tier 8. Both the T-54 and the Object 430 Type 2 are very good Tier 9 medium tanks, and as I mentioned, the T-54 branches off to both the Object 140 and T-62A. The Object 430 Type 2, the grind itself is actually quite painless. You get the 100mm M63 gun completely stock. The first package upgrade gives you the enhanced turret and treads. And the final package upgrade is another radio and engine upgrade, still with the 100mm M63 gun. There is an alternate package choice where you use the 100mm D54, which is another gun on the fully upgraded T54. But I strongly recommend you stick with the M63. It's a very well-performing gun. And then for another 200,000 XP with the 430 Type 2, you get the Object 430. And we're going to take a look at the hard stats on the Object 430 right here, right now. So let's open up the details. And the Object 430 itself, you get the 5TD engine, which is a common engine in the high-tier Russian medium tanks, giving you 580 engine horsepower, the same as the Object 140 and the T-62A. Now, the Object 430 uses the same gun as the Object 140 and the T-62A, the 100mm U8TS, although the Object 430s has the most different hard stats associated with it. It still gets the same penetration and damage, 264 pen with APCR, 330 with heat rounds, and 320 average alpha damage with both of those. 50 penetration with the high explosive for 420 average alpha. The main difference between the Object 430's gun with the 62A and the 140 is both the rate of fire and the handling. The rate of fire on the Object 430 is slightly higher, 9.36 over 9.09 on the other two tanks. The aim time is significantly lower, 2.29, which is an average in World of Tanks on a whole, and a fairly average accuracy rating of 0.37. The other two tanks have 2.0 for the T-62A and 2.09 on the Object 140 for aiming time, and both of them have, I believe, 0.34 of accuracy. So this gun, it aims slower, it's more inaccurate, but it shoots faster. There's always trade-offs for having a better one thing and having a more negative other thing. The overall mobility of the Object 430, the turret traverse is 40 degrees per second, and the tank traverse is 52 degrees per second. Both pretty good, fairly normal for a medium tank to have about 40 degrees turret traverse. The standard view range is 400 meters, very normal for a lot of tier 10s, and the signal range is 730 meters, so you definitely don't have to worry about things like signal boosting or relaying for your cruise skills with this tank. Excuse me. The turret armor is rated at 248 in the front and 185 in the sides. We'll get more into that in the future there, but the turret armor, it's not as good as it shows there. It is still pretty good though. But you can see here, especially with the gun handling in particular, you can understand what I mean when I'm saying that the gun handling is fairly bad. In the essence that the aim time is a whopping 2.29. There's only a couple tier 10 medium tanks that have that average of an aiming time. Most of them are better, to be totally honest. And the accuracy of 0.37, as I said, it's actually the worst out of all tier 10 medium tanks that we have in the game right now, as most are 0.36, anywhere between 0.36 to 0.30. So we're going to open up and take a look at the equipment and consumables. Now, the nice thing about Update 2.2 is you can actually see it right above the tank list there, but I'll go through my choices in just a minute here. I only stocked 40 standard APCR rounds. I actually put on 5 heat rounds, which was a first for my tier 10 mediums, and only 5 high explosive rounds for pesky waffles and boresigs, etc., etc. These can be set to however you choose. I might lower them. For consumables, very basic: large repair, large first aid kit, and automatic fire extinguisher to help reduce the chance of fire. The fire extinguisher is actually pretty important because this thing has fuel tanks in the front. Equipment, very basic medium setup: coated optics, medium caliber tank gun rammer, and a vertical stabilizer. The vertical stabilizer is easily the most important one to help mitigate the crappy gun handling as much as possible. You could switch out optics for vents if you really want to squeeze out every ounce of DPM as much as possible. Cruise skills. By the time I got to the Object 430, sorry, keep in mind this was my first IS-6 cruise, so I started with Mentor and Brothers in Arms to stack together and help train cruise skills a little bit more quickly. Right after that, I trained repairs and Sixth Sense on my IS-6. Those are 2 must-haves for a medium tank, so hopefully you'll have them by the time you get to the Object 430 down this line. Camouflage. You definitely want the camouflage skill by the time you get to the Object 430, and probably even by the Tier 9 or Tier 8 tank you should have camouflage trained on your crew. Really helps with the camouflage rating on this tank. Safe stowage, I believe I had that by the time I got to the Object 416, as the ammo rack is very vulnerable in the 416 and the 430 Type 2. But by the time you get to the 430, you might want to switch it for preventative maintenance, as the fuel tanks and engine are much more exposed on the Object 430 than the ammo rack. But personally, I just left safe stowage on because you can still get ammo racked in this thing. Clutch braking, definitely one of my must-haves for medium tanks. You can never turn too fast in a medium tank. Very handy to improve on that 52 degrees a second traverse speed with the Object 430. And before too long, I trained Smooth Ride to help with the on-the-move accuracy of the gun, combining it with vertical stabilizers to mitigate the poor on-the-move accuracy as much as possible. And right now I am training Snapshot. Once that finishes, I will have all the skills and equipment basically necessary to try and reduce the crappy gun handling on this tank. Other skills you might want to consider, you may want to think about pain tolerance. The driver is actually quite exposed in the front of this tank. He can die a lot. Situational awareness will improve your view range. Never a bad choice to have in a Tier 10 medium tank. Off-road driving to improve on the terrain resistances on this tank. The terrain resistances on the Object 430 are the worst of the Tier 10 Russian mediums. Silent driving. Definitely put this in your first dozen or so cruise skills to improve the camo rating on the move. Mediums lose a fair bit of their camo rating on the move, not like lights. So having silent driving to help reduce that would be awesome. Deadeye, this thing shoots so fast, every shot you take increases the chance that you damage a module or injure a crew. So maximizing the opportunities to do that, you might want to put this on within your first 12 to 16 crew skills. Muffled shot, this thing spits ammo, especially if you strap on vents and extra combat rations. And spitting ammo can really kill the good camo rating on this tank, so you might want to consider muffled shot, again, within your first 12 or so crew skills, after you get the ones necessary for improving the gun handling. And if you get preventative maintenance, you'll probably want to throw on firefighting at some point, especially if you decide to run extra combat rations on this tank instead of an automatic fire extinguisher. So that's essentially what I have for skills right now, as well as ones that I would recommend for any 430 tankers. Here we are in tanks.gg. Let's take a look at the armor now, using the tank inspector. So the 248 on the turret is right around the gun mantlet. Right behind that, 210 millimeters, and then the 185 is behind that on the side. The cupolas are 160 millimeters thick, and the upper front plate is 120 millimeters, sloped really well. The thing about the 430 is that it relies on armor thickness instead of sloping, unlike the 140. Now, the interesting thing to note is the side of the hull shape here. It's got these funny little wings, and that's what makes it have 80 millimeters of side armor, making it good for side scraping. So the front plate itself is only about 200 effective. Again, it relies on thickness and sloping. You've got some auto-bounce collars right above that. The front of the turret, actually quite good, 250 plus to the left, directly to the left and the right of the gun, and getting better as you go further to the outside of the turret. Right above the gun, you've got a band that is an auto-bounce zone, but yet above that, the very top of the turret, easy pen, 140 millimeters thick at most. That top part of the turret is only 30 millimeters thick. You can see it blinking right there. The cupolas themselves, about 175. They are 160 millimeters thick, so they are kind of tough to pen, especially for lower tier tanks. But that's essentially how it goes. The side of the turret, 130 millimeters, and dropping all the way down to 90 millimeters near the back. And you've got a nice band of 80 millimeters of armor right behind the treads on this thing. It's really flat there, but it's actually 80 millimeters thick. So it has the same effective armor value as this band right here, where the wings poke out over the treads. That whole bit right there, 80 millimeters thick, just above the tracks, dropping down to 70 at weird angles in some points. And this is what lends it the good side armor. You'll get a lot of bounces off of this side here. You've got 100 millimeters in the tracks, so that'll absorb quite a bit of damage. So essentially, if you're side scraping at an angle of about here, that whole wing is a ricochet zone, and your tracks will absorb shots in there as well. It'll make the side of your tank quite well protected, turning your turret like so. This is actually a fairly sharp angle to side scrape at, but it makes your tank quite well protected. You've got 220 effective on the upper front plate, so fairly easy pens for a lot of 10s, tier 10 guns, but tough for a lot of 9s and 8s especially. The back of the tank, the back of the turret, you're only getting about 60, 70 millimeters. Very vulnerable. The back of the tank itself, about 40 millimeters. Naturally, that can be expected. So a couple of the base stats here on the 430. The gun depression at the front of the tank, 5 degrees, and that's the case almost all the way around. But there comes a point where you're aiming backwards and you only get 1 degree of gun depression. This is pretty much just over your rear drive wheels where you only get 1 degree of gun depression. So it's if you're being chased by an enemy and you're trying to shoot them at, say, about this angle here on the left side, and on the right side about this angle here, you're going to have a tougher time as you're only getting 1 degree of gun depression at those angles, as opposed to your usual 5 degrees of gun depression. The 430, like I said, spits out ammo, 3,128 DPM, better than the STB-1s by almost 100 points of damage per minute, just barely eking out the STB-1 for better DPM. Like I said, this thing absolutely spits ammo, and its DPM is one of its saving graces. 264 mil average penetration, very good, very good average for a medium tank. The rest of these stats here are actually based off the PC, 2.21 aim time and 0.36 accuracy. Those are PC values, so tanks.gg is useful for stuff, but you can't go by everything off of it. 1900 health. This is actually kind of low. The average for mediums is 1950, so this thing has a little bit less HP than most other tier 10 medium tanks. Now, throwing on a gun rammer and the Brothers in Arms skill, you can see that the seconds to reload drops all the way down to 5.4, just with the usual basic stuff that you would put for equipment and skills on your tank. So you can definitely stack that with vents and extra combat rations to really squeeze out every last bit of DPM on this tank. We're going to run a comparison with the Object 140 here. The Object 430 still maintains better DPM than the Object 140 by far. Comparing to the Object 430 version 2, let's take a look at how the 430 handles to the previous tank. You've got better DPM and pen, that's a given, but you have better aim time than the Object 430 version 2, for sure. Your turret traverse dispersion is better, and you have better terrain resistances than the Object 430 version 2. You get 1 degree more of gun depression, another 25% increase in gun depression, which is nice, and the turret actually rotates all the way around. So this tank should feel very comfortable compared to the 430 version 2 right off the bat. You get a little bit faster tank traverse at 52 degrees over 48 degrees per second. So like I said, this tank should feel quite comfortable. For the most part, it'll just it does a couple things a lot faster. The gun handles better than the 430 version 2 for sure. But comparing it to its brother, the Object 140, you can see a lot of the negatives going on here. The aim time and accuracy definitely worse, but the dispersion values when moving and traversing the tank much worse than the Object 140. The turret traverse dispersion is pretty bad, and the terrain resistances are just a little bit worse than on the Object 140. Hence why I recommend you get off-road driving at some point within your first 12 or so skills to help mitigate that as much as possible. The rest is basically just based off of PC stats, so we can't really compare off of tanks.gg, unfortunately. But that still gives you a pretty good basis, and a good idea of how this thing works. And very good for using the tank armor inspector, as always. So when you're sidescraping this thing, the minimum angle you want to do is right about here, about 25 degrees, because that makes the wing on the side is an auto bounce, and your front plates is essentially the best effective armor value you're going to get, even with angling on this thing. About 240 effective, which is not great, but it's not bad either. You'll get some troll bounces off of it. And sidescraping at that angle will make you fairly tough to pen for a few Tier 9s, especially Tier 9 medium tanks. So let's take a look at where the crew and modules sit on the tank. From the front of the Object 430, you can see the driver right there in the middle of the upper front plate, and that's why I recommend either you throw in a large first aid kit or train pain tolerance on your crew skills. And as you can see right beneath the driver, it's all fuel tanks. That's why preventative maintenance and or an automatic fire extinguisher are highly recommended, as that will get damaged a lot, especially when something is close to you shooting downwards into your tank, essentially making that pretty good upper front plate borderline useless. Starting to look at the left side of the tank here, the gunner sits in the front of the turret on the left-hand side, right where the turret armor starts to get really weak. So he can get shot out quite a bit if you take a bad hit there in the side of your turret. He essentially sits in front of the hatch poking up on top of the turret there. So he can get knocked out fairly easily. The turret ring is a little bit more exposed on the Object 430 compared to the other Russian tanks, especially the T-62A. The left side of the tank here, you can see you've got nothing but fuel tank in the front, underneath the upper front plate as well as in the sides. Directly behind that first fuel tank is the ammo rack, and that's why I keep safe stowage, because that can actually be damaged quite easily from the sides. But definitely want preventative maintenance at some point, because the hull is pretty much all fuel tank in the sides here, as you can see. And you can see just in the back of the turret there, your commander sits just underneath the hatch, right behind the gunner. The very back, you can see the commander, as I mentioned, he takes up basically the whole left side of the turret from the back end. Right next to him is ammo rack in the right side of the turret. I have yet to be shot there, thankfully. My ammo rack's only been damaged from the side. But it doesn't happen very often. It's a really small target compared to the previous two tanks. You've got your engine deck in the very back of the tank, very exposed to somebody who gets behind you, so try to keep enemies in front of you as best as you can. I'll just add on that, things happen. Somebody might get behind you. Chances are they're going to damage your engine. Your loader sits underneath the other hatch on the right side of the tank, right in front of the ammo rack. So basically getting a shot in that part of the turret will really cripple the saving grace of this tank, its DPM, because either your ammo rack will get damaged or you'll lose your loader. One of the two. Both are bad, but one of the two will happen. And you can see on the right side of the tank, in the hull there, just above the side skirts, it's all red again. Looking at it from the side, it's red because that's all fuel tank area there in the back of the tank. The front of the tank behind the drive wheel, again, fuel tank. Definitely recommend an automatic fire extinguisher on this tank. I can't say it enough, and or preventative maintenance. And then you've got the ammo rack directly behind the fuel tank there, underneath the front of the turret. So you definitely want a couple defensive crew skills on your crew. Preventative maintenance, safe stowage, I can't recommend those enough. Automatic fire extinguisher would definitely help with this thing, for sure. So that's an in-depth look at the Object 430. It's a pretty good, solid, well-performing machine, but don't get me wrong. It is inconsistent, especially the gun handling. It will let you down sometimes, and I have had some straight-up crappy games with this tank. Mostly it is due to me, my ineptitude. I'm not that great at this game. I'm not the first person that'll tell you that. But the gun itself is much more inconsistent than previous tanks. The guns on the previous tanks, like the 416 and the 430 Type 2. I've had games where I barely broke 1,000 damage on both a win and a loss, and I wound up getting nothing for it, losing some silver even, and getting very little XP to show for it. What can you do? There were games where I just got myself into a very aggressive position with minimal to no support, and wound up getting smashed by artillery, just making me a very vulnerable target for somebody to sweep in and finish me off. And situations like this are 100% my fault. It's not the fault of my team or anything like that, or artillery for targeting me, because I was probably his only target. This is basically my own fault for getting in such an aggressive position and, I guess, expecting to survive. I mean, things happen. It changes game to game. But what can you do? There were games where I didn't even break 1,000 damage, and you know, it's very common. Well, I wouldn't say common. It's not very uncommon, I should say, where I barely get 1,000 damage on either a win or a loss. Essentially, just not being a contributing member to my team. That's bound to happen. Most of the time, it's my own fault when that goes on, because I either take a very aggressive position way too early and get knocked out early in the game, or I'm not in a good position to get shots on tanks where the main fight is at. Just playing way too conservative, trying to snipe too much, you know, who knows, or the gun just straight up trolls and doesn't really want to shoot straight. So let's jump into some more gameplay here. Second game I'm going to show you here, I'm platooned with Don Tomo, Ben from the Beard Guys. He's running his Batchat, and my good buddy Ashenbloom, who used to be Panzerfaust, running his Leopard 1. At this point, I'd had about 30, 35 games in the Object 430, so I was still getting a pretty good feel for this tank. My personal opinion is that you don't really get a good feel for a tank until you've played about 100 games in it. Now, to be fair, I didn't have to play 100 games in both the A43 and A44 because they were such good tanks that the grind was actually pretty quick. I believe I only had about 30 games in the A43 and around 60 to 80, I can't remember how many, in the A44, because they're just solid, well-performing tanks, and you know, the grinds were nice and quick on those to get to the next tank. But when you get to a high tier, so for example, you know, tiers 8, 9, 10, because you're in the tank for a lot longer, the grinds are longer to get to the next package, to get the next tank. You sometimes need several thousand XP, anywhere between 80 to about 140,000 XP. It could be anywhere in that range. So essentially, unless you are having extremely good games every game, all the time, chances are you will get roughly 100 games in the tank before you even move up to the next one. And by that point, you'll probably get a good feel for the tank. I find that even fast learners like myself kind of really get a feel for a tank around 100 games, as well as those who are just a little slow to pick up on certain aspects of their tank, even by about 100 games. Even slow learners, I'll just say that, even slow learners should be able to pick up on how they can start using their tank effectively. So the second game here on Pearl River, jumping up into the middle there with Ashenbloom and Don Tomo right behind me. We're able to take out the enemy Batchat really quickly. Still took quite a bit of damage there as he put a shot into me, and I believe the IS-4 put a shot into my backside. They're trying to aggressively push into the middle and get some things going here with their team. So me and Ash and Bloom were just inching forward, trying to get some spots on the enemy tanks, see if there's anybody either by their base or anybody pushing in the northeastern corner on this map. But there's a whole lot of nothing going on, so we just kind of backed up a bit there. Decided not to chance it and poke out and get blasted by what possible snipers there could be back at the enemy team's base. Our AMX-50B tries to go down and make things happen, but he winds up driving off the cliff and getting himself killed. So unfortunately our support did fall quite quickly. And a quick look at the map. It looks like most of their team has pushed down in the southern reaches of the map there. So we know we need to do one of two things. We need to either reposition and go help the other side of the map, or we need to deal with these tanks in front of us really quickly so that we can make ourselves available to help with the other side of the map. Ash and Bloom and I decide we're just going to leave and go to the other side of the map as quickly as possible, as they still have 14 tanks and we're only seeing about 3 or 4 of them here in the middle. So that should be roughly about 10 tanks in the southern reaches of the map. So we want to try and get over there and help out as quickly as possible, as our team is vastly outnumbered on that side of the map. Excuse me. The nice thing about the Object 430 being a Russian medium tank is that it has good overall mobility, pretty good power to weight ratio, good top speed, a better top speed than the T-62A at 55 kilometers an hour, and even though the terrain resistances are worse than the other Tier 10 Russian mediums, it's still pretty good, allowing this thing to just glide over terrain and get to the positions where you need to get to. 2 IS-7s on the cap circle there. Pretty bad situation for me, as I really wasn't expecting to get damaging shots here, due to this gun just not being sniper accurate. They're about 360 meters away and not really presenting their vulnerable parts well enough for me to reliably hit them and get some damage on them. I did get one damaging hit on one of them here, getting our first cap reset with Ash and Bloom and Ben repositioning to get ready to assist me with shooting these guys, and our teammates just doing a good job getting some resets on them with some track shots as a couple damaging hits. One more damaging snipe shot on the IS-7, setting him on fire. That means that he has no more extinguisher. So these two tanks at this point are more than weak enough for Ash and Bloom and Ben to swoop in and just mop things up here. Last IS-7 turning, trying to get a beat on Ben, but me and Ash and Bloom able to track and immobilize him and then put the finishing touches on that IS-7 there. So stopping a very dangerous push on our base there, as they had a large amount of tanks coming around this south side, and they were met with very minimal opposition, if any. Spotting the E-100, I just chanced a glide shot over that way. Commander tells me I only bounced, but I couldn't even see the tank, so I don't know how he knew that. I guess my Object 430's commander is just psychic. This T-110E5 here, I chanced a shot at him. I wasn't expecting to hit, as it was a very small portion of him that was exposed and vulnerable to me. So on being detected, I simply just dived back to cover, not knowing what exactly was behind me. And that's when the enemy T-110E5 comes up behind us. And Ben detects him right away and immediately backs off. I tell both Ben and Ash and Bloom to just pull back. I'll bait some shots from this E5. E5 puts a good shot right into my turret ring, jamming my turret. So I decide to immediately use my repair kit to fix that, as I'm going to need my turret at optimal capacity at this stage of the game. I am down to a 2-shot, but it's we really need to deal with this E5, as nobody else is back here to deal with him. After baiting a shot from the E5, I tell Ben now's the time to go. Ben rushes in to start dumping his clip on this E5. E5 turning his turret for me to put a nice easy shot into the side of the turret, finishing him off before he's able to put more damage on Ben's bat chat. Really, really nice way for us cleaning up that very, very big push, knocking out 3 of their top tier heavy tanks that were threatening our base. So we know there should still be a 1-shot T-110E5 somewhere, and there's a nearly full health E-100 somewhere there as well. We were going to push over that crest, and I said, okay, I'll push forward, see if I can spot them. But upon further review, we decided against it. Both Ben and I pulled back to where we had some support and simply said we need more people to deal with this E100, and I didn't want to simply get taken out by the E100 early without doing any damage to him. So we regrouped with Ash and Bloom and our friendly T110 E5. Both Ash and Bloom and the E5 very, very hurt, but their guns are still in play, so we wanted to regroup with them and get us all nice and together so that we could deal with this E100 as a group instead of just me and Ben. Ben pulls back, sees the E100 as expected. Unfortunately, Ben takes a nasty hit by that E100, taking off half of his remaining HP. And the E100 is still full health. With Ben still on a reload, I decided I need to push forward and either just go to shot from this guy or bounce around to the point where we can just take him on together. So I loaded some heat rounds, put one right through his turret, and he just plops me with his big 150mm gun. And that's when I told Ben, okay, he's fired, get in behind him, finish him off. Ben and Ash and Bloom are able to finish up that game, cleaning house with the rest of our teammates as well. And I myself, while losing a little bit of silver, I still did over 3,000 damage, earned quite a good amount of XP there. Ben and Ash and Bloom also breaking 3,000 and 4,000 damage respectively. 3458 for Ben, 4897 for Ash and Bloom. Very good game by our platoon there. We were able to clean up. Once we took out the heavies threatening our base, we were able to clean up there by just working together on the E100. Me sacrificing myself to take the shot by that E100, as I knew that Ben would be able to put the hurt on a lot more quickly with a full clip of bat chat ammo, as opposed to me. And Ash and Bloom being able to swoop in and also get some flanking shots on him. This next game here on Angst War, I'm going to be going down into the H1J1 area, which is just where I like to go on the south side of this map, either on Angst or Angst War. And you'll be seeing me utilizing the side-scraping capabilities of this tank, even while getting shot at by one or two people who basically know where to hit the Object 430, which is essentially the top of the turret, the very top of the turret. But I'm still able to get a fair amount of damage blocked here. Excuse me. So, me being me, nice and aggressive, as soon as the game starts, I sight where I'm going, and I know why I'm going there all the time, and I immediately turn my tank in that direction, hit the cruise control, and I start going right away, because I want to get into that aggressive forward position as quickly as possible, either denying the enemy access to that location as well, to such a strong position, either denying them outright of such a position, or making them have to deal with myself before they can get it themselves. However, in rushing over there, I run into a pack of enemy medium tanks, a T-62A and E-50 Osifem. We're thinking the exact same thing, trying to rush there really quickly and take that position as well. The T-62A goes all in, trying to get into a good position, but we're able to just swarm him really quick here. Multiple friendly tanks putting shots on him. Unfortunately, the Pershing blocked my shot there with his drive wheel, which could have finished off the 62A or putting him low enough to finish him off. Very, very bad low roll on the 62A. Leaves him on just a sliver of health, so I know I'm going to pull forward and take him out, but the Pershing is way ahead of me and does the same thing. Tried putting a shot in the turret side of the E-50 Osifem, but I hit the 62A's gun barrel on a dead tank. Brilliant. Good shot through the front turret of the E-50 Osifem. Very, very weak part of the E-50 Osifem. I know that tank quite well, so that's just where I shot him. And then when he turned his side, I knew I could put a shot into his side armor, taking him down to a one-shot. So with the E-50 Osifem hiding behind the Carnarvon, the Carnarvon's angled too sharply. I know that I can hit him in the side, no problem. But when the E-50 Osifem pokes out, again, I need to take him out. He's a one-shot, so I simply dealt with him first. The Carnarvon, unfortunately for him, even the 20-pounder gun is just not good enough to reliably and consistently pen the front of my tank, either in the hull or in the turret as well, without having to aim for those small weak spots. So I'm able to utilize that to my abilities, just blocking some more damage there. Also blocking a BL-10 shot from an ISU-152, right up until I get whacked by the Death Star in my turret. Death Star dealing a lot of damage to me, taking off most of the rest of my HP, but still leaving me on 430, which is enough for me to continue fighting. That's when I realized that there's also a Waffenträger shooting at me, and it looks like he shot me with 3 rounds already, so I'm not sure how much of his ammo he's dumped. And essentially I decided I need to back off and reposition myself, as I am 1 shot for all of the TDs over there. And I don't want to get taken out of the game just yet. I have bounced quite a bit of damage, bouncing 1 or 2 Waffenträger shots, bouncing a BL-10 round, so that's about 2,000 block damage right there, possibly. About 1,500, so... Regrouping with my platoon mate, Ashenbloom, dealing with this IS-4, who just pushes too fast, too hard, and 3 of our medium tanks are able to just pounce on him and take him out really quickly. IS-7 in the very middle, in a bit of a poor position, dealing with the enemies in front of him, but also having me and Ashenbloom on his side. Both of us putting a damaging shot at him. That's when I turn around and I see a 48 Patton flanking all the way around behind our friendly T-62A. So I figure I'll turn around and help deal with that Patton. I thought our friendly 121 might be in trouble, but he's able to handle himself quite well, taking that Patton out of the game once and for all. So just getting a bit of a look at the map here. Still not sure if the TDs are poking down the 1 line. Waiting for the 62A to jump out there and see what's going on. It looks like the TDs have repositioned, so I know I can peek out, see if I can get some shots on this T-32, who was hauled down behind some rubble, but he pulls out just enough for me to put a shot into the T-32's weak side armor, severely weakening it for our 62A. 62A is able to take out the T-32, unfortunately taking some hits from the TDs in there, over there in the middle of the map. I see them coming around, putting a side shot into the Death Star. Ashenbloom is able to finally take out that dangerous Waffle, and between me and the 62A, we're able to just make quick work of that Death Star, taking out a very dangerous TD off the board once and for all. So, not 30 seconds ago, the game was looking a lot more even. It was about 8-on-7, and now we're down to a 7-on-3. So the game should essentially be pretty much won for us at this point, as there's only 3 tanks left. Borsig, ISU-152, and a Pershing, all tier 8s. So provided that the players weren't absolutely stellar, me and Ashenbloom fully expected that we'd be able to close this out. The Pershing and the Borsig, however, are able to take out two more teammates actually, sorry, before Ashenbloom is able to finally put the finishing touches on that Pershing. Borsig takes out 1 more teammate. Game's evening up quite a lot, so I decided I'm going to flank far right, get around behind these guys, and get behind this ISU-152. 1 shot in the ISU-152 turned his attention towards me, giving the 121 the opening he needed to put in another side shot, taking out the ISU-152 once and for all, and everybody's able to just swarm that Borsig and take him out of the game finally. So very, very interesting game there. Playing very aggressive, it can pay off in this tank. It's very hit or miss. That Death Star could easily have wrecked me with a good shot into my turret. Got a mastery badge that game with a steel wall and Confederate medal. 4,815 damage dealt, 3,240 damage blocked. The weak spots on this tank, they are glaring, and they're actually pretty easy to notice. They're basically easy to hit if the opponents that are looking at you know where to shoot you. However, if you are utilizing the terrain and objects to your advantage, covering up as much as your tank as possible, sidescraping at a good angle, and just covering up your weak points, you can actually generate quite a bit of damage blocked with this tank, especially with that 80 millimeters of side armor. Really, really effective rating of side armor for sidescraping. So this last game I'm going to show you here, this was actually my 100th game in this tank. I was platooned with my buddies Joe the Frogman and Casual Pie, Joe in his Bat Chat, and Casual Pie in another Object 430. And we got Wide Park. Not a very good map for tanks with 5 degrees of gun depression. Not a very good map for that at all. But still was able to do what I could on this map. This game wound up being very mediocre, and This is essentially what happens fairly regularly with the Object 430. It wasn't so much the map selection as it's usually just either my poor positioning or the gun being trolly. You know, either one of those factors can attribute to not really having a decent game, in my personal opinion. I won't even break my personal goal of damage this game. I think I'll only do about 1,700. But every game, especially in the high tiers, I always set my mind to dealing the same amount of damage that my tank has hit points. If I do at least that much, then I feel like, okay, I did my job, I contributed to the team. Any less than that, and I feel like I really let my team down, and I wasn't a contributing factor, of which can usually lead to some very, very crappy losses. But what can you do? I always want to try to be a help to the team as much as possible. It's not always the case, but what can you do? Something I didn't really note about the Object 430, it's not as good as at snapshotting at the 62A and the Object 140, simply because it doesn't have as good of the dispersion values, but it can still do it within a decent range, roughly about 100 to 150 meters, because like the other Russian medium tanks, the shell velocity of this gun's APCR rounds, the U8TS gun has really high velocity APCR rounds. And even fully on the move, that 46 Patton, I was able to smack him dead on with a bit of a snapshot, an unaimed auto-lock shot from my gun. That is entirely possible to do in this tank because, like I said, the gun not only has good pen at 264, pretty good tier 10 medium tank quality pen at 264, but the shell velocity is very high. It does feel a slightly slower shell velocity than the Object 140, and the T62A, because those tanks' guns essentially feel like lasers. But this tank's gun still feels like it has higher shell velocity than even the E50 Ossifem, which has very high shell velocity. So snapshots, while you might not always hit, especially at the longer ranges, due to the poor gun handling, you can still make those kind of shots with just a quick auto lock and pulling the trigger, simply due to the shell velocity of these APCR rounds. So I'm still just trying to reposition. I took a really bad hit from the E100 there early on, but he's not fully upgraded, as it barely did 500 damage to me. So luckily for me, he didn't whack me with the 150 millimeter gun, only the 128 millimeter gun. So I still have over 2/3 of my HP left over. But still a bad hit that I took, simply just to get one shot off on the M46 Patton on the other team. I'm still just trying to reposition myself, seeing what I can do here. If the tank's tall enough where I can peek over the trains and allow me shots over them, or if I can back up just enough and still use my gun depression to shoot underneath the train. But things just weren't working out for me whatsoever. And it was at this stage that the game was still very even, but we were still down a tank compared to the other team. Up until one of our IS-3s was able to even things up for us quite nicely there. So seeing that the E100's not paying attention, I decided to just poke over, snap a shot off into his backside, get some cheeky damage in right there without him looking, and just trying to harass the enemy tanks in either their flanks or their backsides. Still looking at the E100. He's not looking at me. I know the Jag Tiger's looking this way from my right, but I still chance it, peek over, get a shot off into that E100. Unfortunately for Casual Pie, because the enemies on the right side were already looking over here, he came up after me and took a couple very bad hits from the Jag Tiger and the other heavy tank over there on our right-hand side. So I'm just maintaining close watch on the situation over here on the right side. Seeing the E75 just going for it, jumping right over to get one shot off. I decide we need to really punish him for it. But unfortunately my shot misses, eats dirt, not allowing me to track the E75 and let teammates finish him off. Trying to inch forward and get shots into this Death Star here. Finally getting enough gun depression to shoot him in the turret side, taking him out of the game once and for all. Very dangerous TD. Didn't want him on the board anymore. So at this point, we've finally gained a slight upper hand this game. We're up. We were up 8-7, and then a Waffle 4 takes out Casual Pie. Unfortunately, my snapshot there missed as I hit a railroad track at the very last second, making my shot go way high. And knowing that I have enough HP to take a hit from this Waffle 4, I go very aggressive on him and just start putting shots into him. But lucky for me, he seemed to have the big gun, so he wasn't able to aim in quickly enough and take me out of the game before I was able to put 2 quick shots on him in rapid succession. E100 trying to escape, but Joe the Frogman is able to chase him down, and I'm trying to shoot this Leopard prototype and failing miserably. So Joe is able to swing his turret around, put 1 more shot in the Leopard prototype, take him out of the game as well. So that essentially closes out this game for us, as we still have 6 tanks to their artillery. So we're just trying to hunt them down, searching for the usual artillery spots. Back of the map here, very top right corner, or sorry, bottom left corner of the map on the map screen. I'm going to swoop around at the last second here and just absolutely poach this kill. Bang. Another 72 damage to my name. So very kind of mediocre game, in my personal opinion. Not really contributing much there. Thankfully, I wasn't a negative influence on the team, just getting killed super quickly. But you know, I was still able to do 1971 damage, doing my contributing factor. Not a great game, but that was my 100th game, and it wasn't entirely terrible, so I was okay with that. So folks, that's essentially the Object 430 in a nutshell. Is this tank itself worth going down this line for? Yes, if you want another Tier 10 medium tank. No, if you only want the best of the best. But the line itself is a great line. I cannot recommend doing it enough. That is Episode 5 of Mediums Forever. This concludes Mediums Forever for now. And until next time, this is Mobius signing off. Have a great night. Thanks very much for watching.